Hello and welcome to PolyCosm. My name is Christina and today we'll be creating a stylized alien planet using the Quixel Megascans library for some really great realistic assets, Botaniq to populate our scene with flora, and Sketchfab for some stylized models to really make our concept come to life. Let's get started. So when planning out a stylized scene, I always make sure to gather lots of reference. Here I'm using the free software PureRef to keep my references on screen at all times. I just want to make sure I never lose track of my main idea, which as you can see is a very atmospheric green alien environment with contrasting red elements such as rocks, sand, and so on. I want these references to serve as inspiration and not as a strict guide. I love experimenting and not quite knowing where I'll end up with the concept. I'll be freestyling for the majority of the video, so it's going to be paced a little bit differently. Starting off, let's find a few ground assets. I'll be using the Quixel Megascans bridge for this, so if you're unfamiliar with the bridge, I'll link to some relevant videos where I explain Megascans in a bit more detail in the description and pinned comment below. I'll also include a video showing how to install the add-on in Blender in order to get the bridge working. Alright, so for rocks, looking at the reference, I can see that a lot of these are kind of canyony-esque rocks. You have these kind of curved rocks, and if you see here, yeah, these are very deserty type rocks. So what I've done is I've gone to the canyons of Utah and just tried to go under 3D assets, and I'm going to try to kind of find my ground plane here. I think I'm going to choose one of these flat surfaces. So if you choose one and go to the 3D preview, you can actually turn it around, which I think is pretty cool. But as you can see, it isn't fully closed. It has an open back, so maybe we can try to find a closed one. Actually, yeah, one of these would actually be a pretty good starting point. Once you've figured out which asset you want, you basically just hit download, so you can choose the resolution if you want 2K, 4K, 8K. I usually go for 2K because when you start adding a lot of these into the scene, it can get very bogged down. And if you have a computer that is not as performance heavy, I would try to go for 2K resolution. If you're going to have something very close up to the camera, you might go for 4K, 8K, but usually you don't really see a lot of these assets too close. So I'm just going to go for 2K, hit download. And you can see the progress up here, and there we go. And then you just hit export. So once you have the bridge installed, you just hit export and it will say exported successfully. And now if we go into Blender and we hit the material preview one, we can see that there's a lot of glitching happening, but there is a very easy fix. So you just choose your asset and then you just go to alpha here, and you can see that it's connected to the alpha, whereas it's actually supposed to be connected to the normal. So you just bring that down to the normal and that's it. Let's actually go to the camera and enable it and then hit numpad 0. And if we open the end panel and go to view and camera to view, we can try to position our camera, and obviously I kind of don't want that ratio, so let's go for 1920 by 1080. Yeah, I think this is better. So we don't have to choose a camera angle right now. I'm just gonna position it here and just unhook that, and then there we go. So we can start planning our camera position later on. So I'm just gonna put it somewhere. I'm just gonna hide it so it's not in the way right now, and let's start building our scene. So as you can see, I'm just trying to find some alien rocks and just kind of roughly place them around in the environment. I'm not going to settle on a composition just yet. I just kind of want all of my assets in the scene first, and then we can kind of start playing around with things. You don't always have to stick to the same type of assets. Like here I went to the limestone quarry, and even if the colors are quite different, we'll be changing the colors later on, so we'll kind of make everything look a bit more cohesive. So don't be afraid, like if you find like different types of rocks and the colors aren't matching, that's not a problem. We're gonna change the colors of like all the assets basically, so don't worry about it. Okay, so now that we have a few assets in the scene, I kind of tend to start planning out a bit. So if I go to the camera mode, yeah, let's just start moving things around. I think actually instead of this, I'm gonna turn it into water. So let's head into the Quixel bridge and let's just search for water and see what we find. Yeah, let's go for this swamp water. So what we do is just we hit export, and then in Blender we go to the textures, because these shaders always show up as textures here, so we just need to find it. So let's see if we, yeah, swamp, just search for swamp, and there we go. And obviously we need to fix the asset. So if you want to scale the texture down, you just basically add a mapping and texture coordinate node, and you kind of hook that up to the vector. And then if I hook that up to the vector here, and then for the scale, if we make that a bit bigger, let's say 5, you'll see the texture actually scaling down. So let's try going, kind of looks like sludge more than anything. Let's go for 3. Actually, yeah, that makes it look a bit more like water, so maybe 2. So we'll change the color of everything later on, so don't you worry about that. So I think kind of what's throwing me off, because I'm trying to design this and I'm not really finding a really good composition, I think what I'm gonna do is try to like make the colors a bit more cohesive. That way everything looks like it would fit a bit better. So let's try actually doing that. So let's choose one asset and then find the texture. If you ever get lost, like if you're way over here and you can't like find any textures, all you need to do is just hit A and then numpad comma, and that kind of brings up everything. So let's move this aside a bit and let's actually add in a color ramp. And as you can see, it's now black and white because we have black and white chosen here. But if we start kind of tweaking some of these colors, we're going for like a red purple theme and then green to kind of contrast that. You might have to change this later on. I'm just kind of experimenting at this stage and just trying to find something that looks cool. So let's see. Okay, that looks pretty cool. So what we can either do is kind of group this, which means we can kind of reference this later on. So when we choose to kind of change the color of one of these, it changes the color on all the assets we've kind of copied this to. Let's go back and let's call this purple pink asset. So now if we kind of copy this and then we choose another rock and then kind of paste that in, if we now slot that in between, you can see because it has different values, that color ramp is not going to work the same. So what we can do is we can just hit 2, which makes this kind of like a unique node. And if we actually go in and start editing things, you'll see it only changes this rock compared to this one. For this one, we might have to actually increase the contrast a bit. So if we go back and if we add in RGB curves and let's crunch those values a bit. There we go. So now what we can do is go back in here. And if we just keep kind of tweaking this. Yeah, we can make this one a bit more purple, so that's fine. All right, so let's go back. Let's copy this one. Paste that in here. You can already start seeing how this is starting to look like more like an alien planet. Isn't that cool? So for the puddle, let's try to make it a bit more of this like sickly blue-green color. So let's add in a hue saturation right before base color. Let's try to just, that kind of looks alright. All of this is going to look a lot better once we have atmosphere in, because that's going to kind of tie everything together and kind of give more of like an overall color tone, if that makes sense. So if you ever have any parts where you're kind of having things like stick out, you can go into edit mode and just select a few faces. And then if you go to proportional editing up here, you can hit G and you can just try to kind of move things down, and you can like scroll in to make that selection a bit smaller. So it's only affecting a smaller area. So let's kind of move that a bit down. So what I'm thinking right now is I'm quite liking how things are quite slanting and like very slopey. So I'm trying to have a lot of these rocks kind of like slant towards either the right or towards the left. So I'm just experimenting and trying lots of different things and seeing like kind of what I like. So this kind of process, like it takes a while when you don't like have a rough sketch, but it's also kind of fun. I just really enjoy doing this type of work. Also, am I the only one who thinks this looks super phallic? I know, I'm so mature. So for some of the assets, when you import them, especially when there's like a pack, you kind of see them being tied to like this empty. So either you can select all of them and you can kind of unparent them from the empty by hitting Alt P and then clear and keep transformation. So that way you can kind of just delete the empty, and whenever you move one of these, they're kind of independent assets. But before that, we need to, of course, fix the textures, and then we need to add in our pink purple. So let's move these down here, because as you can see, some of these are quite low quality now because we didn't import the 8K, and we've also been stretching them a lot. So sometimes I like to just cover these up by other rocks. So I just kind of import some custom rocks, and then I just kind of move them to block them like this. And if you have the magnet here selected to face, when you move an asset and then you hit Control and you choose a face surface, it'll kind of snap to that. So that's like an easy way to kind of, whoops. So that's kind of an easy way to like move things around very quickly. And if you want, you can obviously cut off parts, because we see there's like a few parts here we're not using. So what we can do is we can select that. Just make sure that you're in X-ray mode. So you can just press Alt-Z to enter X-ray mode. And then you just select your selection and hit P to separate. Now you can either delete that or you can move that around to a new place. I'm gonna try to find a new place for it. So one thing about these like compositions is obviously you want a few areas of rest. Like you see here, we have this kind of quite empty area, but it kind of allows us a little bit of breathing room. Strive to kind of create some areas of rest. So when your viewer first looks at your illustration, they're not like completely overwhelmed by like information and they don't know where to look because like everything's so populated, you know? Alright, so now that we have a general setup, let's use the import images as planes add-on, which comes with every version of Blender. Just make sure to enable it. Let's add in a background by changing the shader to emission before hitting import. I kind of thought an Aurora Borealis type image would work really well and kind of sell the idea of an alien planet. You can also add in several moons or planets or outlines in the sky if you want. I've made a whole video explaining how to add special effects to scenes using images, so if you need some refreshing, I explain the whole process in that video. At this stage, I also start thinking about lighting. Now, you guys know I'm a sucker for the physical starlight and atmosphere add-on. It just makes lighting setup stupid easy. If you can't afford the add-on, which is understandable because it is expensive and you see no use for it, you can use Blender's internal lighting setup. There are tons of videos covering this topic on YouTube, so I don't really see the need to repeat that very same information. But what I will say, if you want some of these options for free, I highly recommend checking out Curtis Holt's startup file, which he has posted on Gumroad for free. There you can set up an HDRI map really easily and have that dictate the overall look and color mood of your scene. You also get some really great volumetric fog options, which is super handy. I'll link to the video in the description and pin comment below. So I'm going to try to populate the background of the shot a bit more and just jump forward a bit, since I'll basically be repeating the very same process. So I'll see you in a bit. I decided to add some Sketchfab models to make this seem more like an alien planet. I thought adding mushroom trees would be a fun little addition, as well as these alien plants that I found via the Sketchfab add-on. The add-on is completely free and I basically use it in my day-to-day Blender workflow. Alright, now that we've populated a big portion of our scene, let's bring in some flora. Now we could go either two ways with this. I'll show you how to use the Quixel assets to add grass and plants to a surface, and then I'll show you how Botaniq, the add-on, handles this particular workflow. So here in Quixel Bridge, I've chosen which grass I want to import, and the thing with the grass is it comes imported like the rocks did, if you remember the rock pack, where you basically get these individual strands of grass. And we're basically going to use that to kind of populate a plane. So what we need to do first is actually create the plane. And the thing with the plane, you have to make it subdivided because each face takes up 1 square of grass, if that makes sense. So let's just subdivide it a bunch of times like that. And now if we go to the particle settings and add in a particle, you can see that we already get some particle action happening, but we need to choose hair. So that kind of simulates grass, although now it's really, really tall. But don't worry about that. So we need to first import our grass. So let's hit export. And the thing with particle grass is that you need to make sure that it's in its own collection, which is one of these boxes. So let's just actually call that grass. And under render, you need to choose render as a collection. And then you basically choose your collection. So let's say grass. And of course, I made the mistake of having the plane inside the same collection. So I just need to move it outside. And then you can see that we already got lots of grass happening. And this is the original collection. So once you've kind of added that to your plane, you don't need to see that anymore. So you can just hide it. And from here, we can start playing with numbers. We can start playing with seeds, hair length, like this. Segments. You can also choose the scale and randomness, so you get a lot of options to kind of play around with here. So this is a great way to kind of generate grass quickly, but as I understand, it's not as easy to kind of choose where you get the grass in terms of, for example, weight painting, and that's actually what Botaniq does really, really well. So I'll show you in just a moment. And here in Botaniq, we have a lot of options. You obviously have the spawn options, so you can spawn lots of different trees. You can choose if they're winter trees, summer trees, autumn trees, and you also have a lot of leaves, ivy, grass, and so on. But what I'm going to do today is use the option where I can basically populate a plane. So using the scatter assets option, I am going to choose my plane as the target, and I'm going to add the plus button. And then I'm going to choose which type of grass I want. Let's see. Let's try European meadow. So add that and then press OK. And then you can see it's already populated. And the cool thing about this is like you can weight paint it. You get all the particle options like right here in the menu. So you don't have to go through the particle options here on the right. I love this new addition to the add-on. So let's try weight painting a bit. So if I choose weight paint, I can basically choose where I want there to be more and where I want there to be less. So as you can see, wherever I paint red now is where we have a lot of grass happening. And if I try going a bit down on the weight and try painting, you can see it's not as dense. So you can choose like the density, you can choose exactly where on the plane you want it, and that will save you so much processing power, being able to kind of use it just only where you need it. And it's just so easy and accessible right here in the menu. So let's actually go to the shaded mode. Let's hide that and look at that. Just look how realistic it is. So if we go back, we can actually choose, let's see, daisies. Let's up that to 8 and you can see that updates right away. How about dandelions? Let's up that to 12. Maybe dandelion A to 15. And there we go. So updates right away. It's so great. So I think I'm actually going to try to use this add-on because I feel like I have a bit more control with Botaniq. So I'm going to try to use that on the alien planet surface and just kind of try to see if I can add a bit more grass, a bit more realism basically. Oh, and I also forgot to mention, but I think this update is super cool, is that you can actually also paint in vines. So if I add in vines here, so instead of grass, I'm going to choose vines and then press OK. And then if I choose the grease pencil option and I start drawing and hit convert, isn't that so freaking cool? And if I go to material mode, just, oh my God, look at that. How freaking cool is this? Wow. This update is amazing. Okay, so now that I've covered how to use the Botaniq add-on, let's try actually adding a bit of grass. So let's try selecting this surface. And if I go to the Botaniq add-on, let's try adding in a bit of grass. So let's see what kind of grass we want. That is quite dense, so let's actually reduce the number to maybe like 200, maybe reduce to 150, and let's see for scale. Yeah, maybe a bit smaller. Obviously we would have to change the color on this, but I think it's actually quite well distributed. Obviously if you want to be very precise, you can kind of use the weight paint and then you can kind of erase wherever it kind of goes over the rocks, but I'm not going to be too bothered by that, to be honest. So let's see. So in order to edit the grass color, we need to unlink these assets from the original Blender file. So all you need to do is to select the asset, go to Object Data Properties and press the Unlink button here. And in order to edit the texture, we also need to make sure to do that here. Now if you change the hue, you can see that kind of working. So I'm kind of thinking a bit blue-greenish. I'm gonna unlink the rest of the assets and then come back. So now that I've unlinked all of them, I'm gonna copy the hue. So hover over and then press Ctrl C to copy the value. And then I'm just gonna go down and Ctrl V, paste it. So as you can see, once I actually added more grass to another part, we got the green grass again. So what I'm gonna do is in that collection, I'm actually gonna delete them. So delete all of the assets. And then I'm gonna copy this and then paste that in that folder. There we go. So now we obviously need to reduce the amount. So let's see. Our environment is starting to look a bit more convincing now. I also wanted to play with the idea of adding sand to the ground and rocks to just make things look a bit more deserty. What I did was I actually watched this video to figure out the setup on how to make the top portion of any 3D model covered in snow. And instead of the snow material, I used this sand tutorial to create a sand material. All we need to do now is just change the colors of the sand to something that pops a bit more. And for every other asset, we just need to copy and paste that very same setup. All right, everything's starting to look very fancy now. So the last thing I want to add is atmosphere and fog. And in the previously mentioned video, I kind of go over that entire workflow, but I thought I might as well just kind of do it in this video and show you guys how I would do it for this particular scene. So all you need to do first is to add in a cube or any other shape really, and then just move that. So in order to avoid this bloom, I'm just going to go to clay shaded mode. So you basically want to determine where you want the fog to start. So for me, I think right behind this tree would be a good place. So I'm just going to go to the top view and then I'm just going to scale the cube to kind of cover that. And once I'm happy with the placement, I basically add in a volume and an empty. And through the modifier panel, I add a mesh to volume. And then I select the cube we just created. So as you can see, it already starts generating lots of atmosphere. So let's also create a texture. And through the modifier properties, we can choose the density. But before then, we need to hide the actual cube. So if we now go into the camera view and turn on the shading, you can see that it's super, super thick. But look at all the cool lighting and the volumetric shadows we get. It just brings so much life to the scene. So I'm going to choose the volume and I'm going to make it slightly less dense. So 0.1, that's still too dense. 0.01, that is a bit better. Maybe a bit more. And through the material, we can actually change the colors. If you just open up the volume tab and under color, we can adjust the color here. So I think I'm gonna go for like a kind of green bluish hue. And I kind of want there to be a bit more volume here. So what I'm actually gonna do is bring up the cube back again. And then I'm gonna select both the cube and the volume and then Shift D, duplicate that. So hide both of the cubes again. And for this volume, so in order to move the volume, you have to select both the cube and the volume. And then just move it to wherever you want it. And if we go back to our camera view, hide the cube. There we go. You can see that it just brings a lot more realism to the scene. And this is what I was talking about earlier, how the volume and fog kind of ties everything together thematically. It kind of adds like an overall color wash. So what's actually happening now is that both of these volumes share the same material. So if you want to kind of change the density and the color of this foreground one, so in order to do that, you basically just press this little button and 001 will appear. And that basically tells you that this is now its own material. And for the first volume, we need to choose the first material. So let's go to the second volume. And then let's change the color. And here we go. Okay, so this might not be the coolest shot, but the purpose of this tutorial is to provide you guys an insight into how I create terrain shots for my illustrations. This particular workflow allows for a lot of creative freedom and allows me to focus more on the subjects in my illustrations instead of finding the right textures, the right images to photo bash, and so on. With Quixel Bridge, you can create so much variety, it's crazy. Like you see in these illustrations, there are many ways to vary the uses of 3D models. And hopefully this video has helped you to do the same and inspired you. This was a super long one, but as always, thanks so much for watching, guys. We really appreciate all of your support. Bye!